Welcome back to another Drawing in the Dark. My name is Levi Smith. I draw and tattoo for a living, and today we're going to be doing something a little different. One part that isn't different is I'm drawing with a ballpoint pen in my Illo sketchbook, and my shot here is completely out of focus. So, now that we're starting off as we usually do, I'm just starting here with a rough figure sketch here. I have a plan to redraw an old piece that I like to draw back in high school. This guy basically tearing his own flesh off of his face and torso. And it was kind of something that I would draw on a lot of old math homework and in high school journals and stuff. I had a couple of teachers that really didn't appreciate what I was about back in high school, and probably for good reason. I definitely enjoyed making sure that that opinion was reinforced by drawing all kinds of demons, monsters, skulls, melting faces, and stuff all over my homework and whatnot. I think that there was definitely an influence from all of the horror movies that I watched as a kid and old horror comics and stuff like that, where I just got a big kick out of drawing creepy, weird stuff. For one thing, it was a lot easier to draw as a kid because if I made it ugly or awkward or out of proportion, if it was a monster or an alien or something like that, then it didn't really matter because nobody knew what that stuff really was supposed to look like anyway, right? So that kind of gave me this opportunity to draw, develop my hand skills and stuff without necessarily dealing with a lot of discouragement that would come from not being able to draw well. All this creepy stuff. It was just, people would see these drawings and go, "Oh, why'd you draw that?" And then it was mission accomplished. So, yeah. And as we move along here, I'm just working out some of these nice little body horror kind of details, some rib cage and some organs and stuff. I was a huge fan of the old magazine Fangoria, and all of the images and stuff that they would have in there of all the horror makeup and special effects that really became a great resource for wanting to draw kind of zombies and torn up bodies and stuff. And then, later on getting into other more detailed human anatomy books and stuff, learning some of the actual muscle structures and interior kind of workings and stuff like that really helped me pump up some of these kind of horror images, where honestly a lot of it was just to shock a little bit, be a little edgy, draw something strange, and not have to worry about making everything perfect and pretty every time I tried to draw something. And so as I progress through this piece here, just typical with everything else, starting off from that light sketch and then working into some tighter details, and as we are now just kind of doing some darker shading and stuff. I don't know why, but I never draw in the actual eyes in this piece, and I have no clue why I didn't do that. Maybe I just kind of never got to them. Part of it just it's kind of even more unsettling, I think, to not have the eyes drawn in. I don't know. I just didn't do it. I try to work in a good amount of odd little details, though, like just like stretching silly putty kind of flesh and these little skin tears and stuff, and trying to build up the volume and depth of all of these little areas so that it conveys that, that whole intent that he's totally just tearing the skin right off of his own body. But of course, I mean, there'd be a lot more blood, a lot more underlying tissue and stuff. I don't know if it would go straight to the bone or to the organs in some places in a realistic sense. But it definitely conveys the idea, I think, and would fit well in, any kind of like old school horror comic. One thing I think a piece like this really shows well is how deep the piece can get through all these different layers, where I'm not trying to obviously draw out or render, from the start, a lot of these elements. That it really is kind of like that building and building of the structure, where the understructure starts, and instead of putting like clothes and normal musculature on this guy, we basically dress him in gore, and then kind of in the same way though that we would add like clothes or armor or something else, heavy muscles and stuff to the figure work, and then just building up all of these different details and noodling around, adding a little bit more here and a little bit more there. One of the things that I knew with this piece is I wanted it to have a darker, kind of bloodier look to it. So I do end up trying to push the darkness factor as far as like contrast tones a little bit higher than some of the other pieces. Aside from like the V for Vendetta or a couple of others, I do get dark in some of them. But this one I definitely wanted to play off of these contrasting forms and really show the elements and stuff using more of that play off of light and dark versus just the line work, and then use that line work more for some more internal details, strands and striations and stuff, muscle fibers and stuff like that. I don't actually do a lot of horror drawing on the level that I used to these days, especially not like on this kind of level typically. Most of what I end up drawing nowadays, especially for tattooing and stuff, are flowers, animals, general kind of like design elements, more cartoony stuff. I don't often get, or like the overly stylized skulls and stuff like that. So there is kind of like a darker edge and angle to a lot of the stuff I like to draw, but usually not quite to this level as far as explicit body horror and gore, as it were. But yeah, it's fun though. It's something that as I was drawing this out, really felt like I hadn't exactly lost the touch. Some of this stuff can be pretty easy to convey as long as you're willing to get into some of these deeper details and stuff, and then play around with little elements that might pump up the yuck factor in ways. I think this kind of stuff is really fun to go through, especially as a drawing exercise, playing around with all of these anatomy elements, the lights and darks, trying to keep the piece kind of stark and moody and have a bit of intensity to it. Very Bernie Wrightson and some like classic 70s and 80s kind of horror, Swamp Thing kind of stuff, old zombie comics and stuff. That's something that I think would be really nice to come back. The more like old school anthology short story, tales of mystery, creep show kind of horror comics. Not the ones where, there were more parable like in a lot of their storytelling versus more like the long form epic cinematic kind of storytelling that we get now. But it made it easier to digest, really simple to kind of like read, move on, without requiring a whole lot of investment, from the reader. Not like how a lot of stories and storytelling these days is so deep and so drawn out in so many ways where, you almost have to like do your homework in so many ways to understand what's going on in this particular franchise or another. And then there's that struggle of trying to make sure that a new viewer doesn't have to watch 100 hours of existing material and stuff before they can jump in on the latest Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, whatever. But those old school stories, especially those old like EC comic horror stories, some of those would be 8-10 pages of a quick little, kind of horror story where it was a complete little bit, in so many ways kind of poetic and these like little morality plays and stuff that kind of got in there, gave you the story, gave you the whole mood and vibe of everything, and then was just done and moved on. And you didn't have to follow up or become any further invested or know any other like deeper backstories or motivations or anything. They were just really cool in that way. Nice little bite-sized kind of consumables where I'm surprised that stuff like that, isn't being employed more in our current media environment. Some of these shorter horror stories, I think, might actually do better than some more long-form franchise kind of storytelling. Other than the fact of recognizability and stuff, if another Friday the 13th movie comes out, if it's got Robert Englund, then people will show up for it, no matter how old that guy gets. But you're missing the right ingredients and stuff, though, and then that's usually when those things die on the vine, because these established franchises don't just come with that built-in audience. They really comes with those built-in expectations. How do you do an Indiana Jones movie without Harrison Ford? They learned that with the Han Solo movie, with the younger Han Solo. As much as it was impossible for Harrison Ford to be the main character, we all still kind of wanted, something a lot more Harrison Ford-ish in the actor that ended up playing young Harrison Ford, which I think did fine. Just there's that deep-seated kind of expectation that we put into a lot of these older kind of franchises. They keep trying to bring Kirk back instead of trying to do something new with Star Trek. Same thing with Star Wars. They're always trying to figure out a way, how do we bring Darth Vader back into all this? And it's just, I don't know. It's just a weird thing, I guess. But anyway, here it is. Here's this guy. I threw in a little bit of extra shading just to kind of fill up the page, a little bit of this effect behind it. Looks like this guy's not having a good day. Let's hope that you have a better one. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for watching. You want to check out any more of this stuff, give us a like and a subscribe. We got merch. We got all kinds of other stuff. The links are all in the description. And check out our store. And we'll see you again next time. Later.